A maid dressed in simple attire stands before a noblewoman, her hands resting on her stomach. She takes a deep breath before revealing her news. The noblewoman, Ariana Astaroth, is clearly surprised and questions what she means. She then asks if something terrible happened to her, concerned that Alina is not yet married. Alina reassures her that this is what she wanted. Ariana sighs in relief, glad to hear that she wasn't forced into anything. She tells Alina that it's a relief and suggests they organize her wedding before her belly grows bigger. That way, no one will know she was pregnant before marriage, and no ill rumors will spread. She assures Alina that things will be okay and tells her not to worry. Then she asks who the father is, wondering if it is someone she knows. Alina tells her it is his lordship. Ariana freezes, her body tensing. She asks for clarification. Alina states plainly that the father is Rowan Astaroth, Ariana's husband. Ariana stands in shock, unable to process the words immediately. Her fists clench. She asks if Alina understands what she just said, her voice sharp. She questions if she is supposed to congratulate her for conceiving a child with her husband. Alina doesn't back down and asks why Ariana is angry. She reminds her that they have always shared everything. They grew up together, nursed from the same mother. So why can't they share the same husband too? Ariana frowns, trying to form a response, but before she can complete her statement, the door opens. Rowan Astaroth walks in and immediately declares that there's no issue. He tells Alina that he was supposed to be the one to inform Ariana and that she shouldn't stress her pregnant body. He holds her gently, showing his affection. Alina responds that she still had to be the one to tell Ariana. She insists that their bond is strong and reassures Rowan that he doesn't need to worry too much. She tells him it's kind of him to be concerned. Ariana feels ignored, anger boiling inside her as she watches them cling to each other without a care. She demands to know what they are playing at, her voice sharp with frustration. Rowan barely acknowledges her emotions, responding with a nonchalant remark that since she couldn't do it, he simply found an alternative. Without hesitation, he points out that in the 5 years they've been married, she hasn't gotten pregnant. He questions what the reason could be before declaring that the only logical explanation is that she must be sterile. She immediately refutes his claim, arguing that if that were the case, the family doctor would have been the first to know. Rowan scoffs at her response, dismissing her words with a mocking tone. He mentions the doctor's loyalty to the county, implying that the truth could have easily been concealed. Then, as if the matter is already settled, he announces that once the child is born, it will be registered under her name. He reminds her that their contract states his child will inherit the title. Ariana calls him crazy, her frustration reaching its peak. The contract states that their child, hers and his, would be the one to inherit. Even if the child were to be secretly raised outside the mansion, who had ever agreed to such an arrangement? She refuses to accept this and makes it clear that she won't allow it. Rowan scoffs at her defiance, repeating the word allow with amusement. He reminds her that he is the count and questions whether she really believes he needs permission for anything. He asks if she still thinks she is the head of the family, then cruelly reminds her of her past. If it weren't for his family's assets, she would have met her demise and ended up on the streets. He mocks her, asking how she can still act so haughty. His words aren't completely wrong, she thinks to herself. Rowan Green had been a wealthy commoner who inherited a fortune from his father, a successful pawnbroker. Their marriage had been sealed with a contract. Rowan would pay off the Astaroth family's $100 billion debt, and in return the county would make him their son-in-law. Since women couldn't inherit a title in the empire, the moment her father, the previous count, passed away, Rowan became the Count of Astaroth. Rowan stands firm, declaring himself the rightful count and the head of the family. He insists that his origins as a commoner change nothing. He turns to Ariana and tells her that as the count's wife, it is her duty to obey her husband. Obey? She repeats the word in her mind, bitterly reflecting on the situation. No matter how poorly he had handled things, she had fulfilled her role as both his wife and the countess. And yet, this is the treatment she receives in return. A quiet word slips from her lips, good. Rowan takes it as a sign of understanding, his confidence growing. He assumes she has finally realized her place, and with satisfaction, he begins to tell her how she should behave from now on. However, before he can finish, she cuts him off. "Let's get a divorce." Rowan freezes, his mind immediately calculating what that would mean. Divorce would mean returning everything, including the title. His expression shifts, unease creeping in. He quickly raises his voice, telling her not to joke about something like that. She can't divorce him. Their contract forbids it. If she asks for the divorce first, she will have to return all the money he has given her throughout their marriage. Worse, she will be required to pay him 5 times the amount as compensation. A smirk returns to his face as he asks her where she would even find that kind of money. Ariana exhales as if calming herself, and replies simply, "Who knows? He should just wait." Then she turns away, leaving behind a final warning. He will fall in ways his poor imagination could never reach. Without looking back, she walks away. Times change quickly. Factories rise throughout the city, entrepreneurs gain power, and peasants abandon their pickaxes to seek opportunities in urban life. The old nobility, once secure in their fiefdoms, begins to crumble one by one. However, Astaroth County's situation is a little different. Ariana stands before her father's framed portrait, her gaze steady as thoughts weigh heavily on her mind. If only he had focused on securing the family's future, things wouldn't have ended up like this. While struggling nobles in the empire sold off valuable art and antiques to foreign buyers in desperation, her father had done the opposite. He had bought them all, even as debt piled up around him. To him, these artifacts weren't just luxuries. They were precious heritages meant to be preserved for future generations. He had acted under the firm belief that someone would come forward to protect them. Ariana exhales slowly. She doesn't want to blame everything on that belief. If no one else will protect what has been passed down, then she will do it with her own hands. Her thoughts shift to the most immediate problem: money. A divorce isn't just about leaving Rowan. It's about securing the vast sum needed to break free from the contract. If she can gather enough, she can use it as capital to start a business. A plan for her divorce begins to take shape in her mind. 5 years ago, rumors spread among the nobles that Count Astaroth was buying up all available artifacts. Some even went as far as threatening to sell their collections to foreign buyers unless he purchased them at the highest possible price. Taking full advantage of his obsession with preserving noble heritage, they drove up their prices, and he bought everything without hesitation. Now, even if they were to sell everything piled up in the warehouse, repaying the massive debt of 100 billion won would still be impossible. Ariana recalls a conversation she once had with her father. He had looked at her with regret, apologizing for his incompetence. His unwavering beliefs, which he once held so proudly, had ultimately led to their downfall. He admitted that in his blind pursuit of preserving noble traditions, he had also wronged those who worked for their family. But Ariana had already made up her mind back then. She told him she had a solution. She would marry into a wealthy family under favorable conditions. Her father had reacted immediately, scolding her for even suggesting such a thing. He insisted that there was still time to find another way. But she had pressed on, reminding him of the harsh reality they faced. They no longer had any land left to sell. At the very least, they needed to preserve the mansion. Then she told him about Rowan's proposal. Her father's expression had changed. He repeated the name Rowan, the son of Palvin Green. She confirmed it, explaining that Uncle Palvin was the city's largest pawnbroker, and now that he had passed, Rowan had inherited everything. Rowan had promised to take care of their family's debts if she married him. He had even assured her that he would help protect their family members and their precious artifacts. Her father had hesitated, clearly conflicted. He had admitted that Rowan was quite handsome and tall. He even recalled seeing him after a long time, noting how his bright blonde hair seemed to shine even more than before. Ariana had smiled slightly, remembering how Rowan had trembled while proposing to her. She had found it rather endearing at the time. Besides, she had reminded her father, it wasn't as if nobles couldn't marry for love. But still, her father had struggled with the idea. Palvin had been his good friend, but Rowan was not a noble. She had met his gaze and told him firmly that the world was changing. If they didn't adapt, they would be left behind. This was her choice. She had reached out and taken his hand, sealing her decision. Back in the present, Ariana scoffs at how things turned out. Rowan might see her as nothing more than a useless noblewoman, incapable of anything, but he knows nothing. She has already begun earning her own money. Working as an intermediary, she buys and sells artwork for noblewomen, women who, due to their dignity, cannot engage in pawnbroking or second-hand trading themselves. The connections she has as a count's daughter and the artistic knowledge she gained from her father have proven invaluable in this field. Seeing how often they come back to her, she knows they must be satisfied with her work. But it's not enough. No matter how hard she works, she will never be able to amass 100 billion won this way. If she wants to make real money, she needs to start a business. After the divorce, she will also have to consider who will inherit the title once Rowan is gone. But that can come later. For now, she must focus on the most important thing. She cannot be the one to file for divorce. The contract's penalty of 500 billion won is an impossible sum, and she refuses to hand over even a single coin to that scoundrel. She needs to make Rowan file for divorce himself. To do that, she must first find his weaknesses. She will investigate thoroughly, and once she has enough leverage, she will pressure him until he has no choice but to end the marriage. As she plans her next move, she recalls something her childhood friend Winslet once told her about. A certain building. A place like a pawn shop, but one that doesn't just deal in goods. A place that will do anything a client asks for. Ariana arrives at the shop's building and knocks, but no one answers. Frustrated, she wonders why no one is responding and is about to knock again when the door suddenly opens, hitting her nose. She looks up and is momentarily stunned, realizing that the place is managed by an unexpectedly handsome man. The man asks her business, and she exhales, preparing to answer when he suddenly calls her by name. It doesn't surprise her. Her name has been all over newspapers and gossip magazines. Clearly, the rumors have even reached this place. She acknowledges her identity and points out that it's only fair she knows his name too. He introduces himself as Rowan. That name makes her pause. Of all names, he has to share one with that bastard. Annoying. He questions why a noble countess would come to a back alley like this. The reason should be obvious. People visit detective agencies for a reason, after all. He seems confused by her words. Her legs are sore from the long walk, so she asks to go inside to discuss things further. Inside, another man appears, looking as if he just got out of bed. He calls the dark-haired man Wendy and asks what's going on. The first man quickly covers it up, joking that the other guy calls everyone Wendy. Ariana barely has time to process that before the second man, noticing her for the first time, reacts in shock, pointing at her as if she's some strange creature. She deadpans in response, confirming that, yes, she is indeed a person. She wonders if this detective agency is really this short on clients. If they're done being confused, she'd like to get to the point. She's here to make a request. The two men seem interested now and ask what kind of request. It's a long story, but to sum it up, she wants to investigate her cheating husband. Their expressions shift to pure shock. The reactions seem a little too dramatic for her liking. They hesitantly ask why she would come to this place for something like that. She frowns. If not here, then where? Isn't this exactly what detective agencies are for? A heavy silence fills the room. The men exchange glances, but say nothing. Suspicion creeps in. It's a secretive office in a back alley, no signboard, and an atmosphere that definitely doesn't scream ordinary business. She narrows her eyes and throws out a guess. Maybe they're running some secret organization? That accusation sets off immediate panic. The brown-haired man denies it a little too quickly, stumbling over his words before abruptly changing his stance. Of course, this is a detective agency. Obviously. She's not entirely convinced, but moves on. The important thing is getting this job done. She asks how much the request will cost. The brown-haired man hesitates, mumbling uncertainty before suggesting an amount. He barely gets the number out before she agrees to it. It's more than he expected, but she doesn't hesitate as she opens her bag. The two men watch closely as she pulls out an object wrapped in cloth. Their curiosity is evident as she begins to unwrap it. The moment the object is revealed, both of them freeze in surprise. The brown-haired man takes one look at the sculpture and immediately thinks it's completely ugly. He struggles to hide his reaction as he questions whether this is really worth 30 million, wondering if she's trying to scam them. She responds with confidence, explaining that they need to enter the sculpture into an auction under their names, and in a week she will buy it for 30 million. She hands him an envelope, informing him that the auction will take place here in a week. His confusion deepens as he examines the letter, an invitation to a southern auction. He knows this auction well. It only deals with the top 1% of items in terms of artistic value. It seems bizarre to even consider entering this particular sculpture. He voices his doubts, but she assures him it's possible. The auction representative has already appraised it, and though payment will be withheld until the request is completed, they will receive a sufficient balance. Still skeptical, Rowan questions why she's going through such a complicated process. The setup sounds suspicious, like money laundering. He makes it clear he wants no part in anything shady. She remains firm, insisting she would never do anything illegal and always acts in her own name. There will be no harm involved. Rowan isn't convinced. He refuses to take on the request without knowing exactly what she's trying to do. The other man is surprised that he's even considering accepting the offer. Ariana shrugs, saying it's nothing major. She just wants to try her hand at business. That statement alone stuns them both. A noble countess who has spent her entire life in luxury suddenly deciding to enter business? The brown-haired man can't quite process it, while Rowan feels like this will be a difficult challenge for her. She explains that her goal is to make her presence known at the auction. If she wants to be taken seriously, she needs to prove that she can sell legitimate, valuable goods. With that, she bids them farewell, saying they'll meet again at the auction next week before taking her leave. As soon as Ariana leaves, the brown-haired man turns to the Rowan guy, this time using his real name. Panic is written all over his face as he questions Wendy's decision to accept the request. He insists that Wendy should have found a way to decline it somehow. Anything to get out of this mess. Wendy raises an eyebrow, reminding him that he was the one who threw out the random commission fee of $3,000 in the first place. The other man flails his arms, clearly frustrated, admitting that he was just caught off guard. But that doesn't change the fact that Wendy could have just listened to the request details and come up with an excuse to turn it down. Wendy crosses his arms, unimpressed. He sarcastically suggests that he should have spun some ridiculous story. Maybe something about this place not actually being a detective agency, but a top-secret organization created by Emperor Hector himself, tasked with hiding their true identities while carrying out covert missions for the Empire. He waits for a response, but his companion just stares at him in silence, because, well, that wouldn't exactly be a lie. The truth is, this place isn't just some random shop in a back alley. It's a hidden base for knights who conduct secret missions under the Emperor's orders. The brown-haired man groans, clearly exasperated. He argues that Wendy should have still figured something out. But what really concerns him is how Ariana Astaroth even managed to find this place in the first place. Wendy doesn't hesitate. He immediately points the finger at Winslet, suspecting that the man couldn't help but brag about them to the wrong person. It makes sense. Winslet has a big mouth, and Ariana wouldn't have just wandered in here on her own. The brown-haired man throws his hands up, deciding that there's only one way out of this. They'll pretend to investigate, claim they found nothing, and wash their hands of the situation. It's never a good idea to get tangled up in someone else's family drama. He figures they can just return the statue and refuse the commission fee altogether, cutting ties before things get complicated. Wendy, however, doesn't seem convinced. He hesitates for a moment before revealing the real reason why they can't just drop the case. Yesterday, he obtained a list. And on that list, Count Astaroth's name is tied to that incident. That catches the other man completely off guard. He demands an explanation, wondering why that would change anything. Wendy lays it out for him. The Countess herself wants to dig into her unfaithful husband's affairs. That in itself makes the investigation easier for them. But more than that, Something about Ariana's request doesn't sit right. A noble woman of her status suddenly wanting to start a business? That alone raises enough suspicion to warrant keeping an eye on her. For now, there's no need to explain to her that they aren't actually a detective agency. Let her think she's hiring investigators. If anything, it just gives them more time to figure out what's really going on. At the Astaroth mansion, Ariana questions the maid about the person who had been following her earlier when she left. The maid reassures her, explaining that Sarah managed to fool him into thinking she had simply gone to the bookstore. Ariana isn't surprised. It's obvious Rowan that had hired someone to keep an eye on her. He must be getting paranoid, worried she might actually go through with filing for divorce. The thought only makes her more determined. Before she can dwell on it further, the maid hesitates before delivering more unwelcome news. Rowan had given her strict orders to prepare the guest room for that girl, Alina. Ariana stiffens. The maid quickly adds that she tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Ariana clenches her fists. First, he cheats. Now he's openly moving his mistress into the mansion. He's not even pretending to hide it anymore. It's one thing to betray her, but to do it so brazenly, right under her nose? She feels that Rowan is pushing his luck. Elena keeps pulling the servant bell, waiting for someone to come, but the mansion remains silent. After several attempts, she mutters that it must be broken. Normally, a servant would have arrived within minutes, yet no one answers. She glances at Rowan, puzzled. Rowan watches her struggle and tells her the bell isn't broken. The servants are ignoring her on purpose. Ariana must have ordered them to. Elena immediately dismisses the idea. Ariana isn't the type to hold grudges. She's always been kind and fair. Rowan raises an eyebrow, reminding her that she has known Ariana since childhood. Surely she should understand how cunning Ariana can be. Elena insists that Ariana is like a younger sister to her. She's warm and compassionate, incapable of cruelty. Rowan's expression hardens. To him, Ariana is nothing but a selfish woman who tricked him into marriage without revealing her infertility, just to secure her family's wealth. Alina frowns, defending Ariana, saying she only wanted to protect what was important to her. Rowan scoffs at her loyalty. Even after being treated poorly, she still takes Ariana's side. He tells her that while they may have grown up together, Ariana is nothing like her. Alina is warm and sincere, while Ariana is cold and calculating. She sold herself to him for money, yet never once humbled herself before him. Alina kneels beside him, her expression filled with concern. She tells him that his pain is her pain and that Ariana has already turned her back on him. Now her entire world revolves around him alone. Rowan pulls her into his arms, holding her close. Elena buries her face in his chest, but her expression shifts. Behind the soft, comforting act, her eyes hold something else, something hidden. She remembers the past, how Ariana grew up as the prestigious daughter of Count Astaroth, while she, the maid's daughter, was destined to serve her. They ate together, studied together, met people together, but Ariana was always the center of attention. Now, things have changed. The man holding her is a count. He puts her first, notices her when she plays innocent, cares for her in ways he never cared for Ariana. With a future like that in her grasp, she's willing to do whatever it takes to secure it. The maid fidgets, clearly distressed. She urges Ariana to take action, insisting that Rowan's behavior is unacceptable. Letting him occupy the guest room with that woman is a disgrace. He needs to be thrown out immediately. Ariana tilts her head, pretending to consider it. Her lukewarm reaction catches the maid off guard. This is the same woman who once charged at wrongdoers like a locomotive. Now she barely seems bothered. She tells the maid to let him be. Rowan might be reckless, but he isn't foolish enough to openly ruin his own image. Nobles thrive on appearances, pretending to be polite while scheming behind closed doors. With capitalists gaining influence, nobility clings to tradition and prestige as their last claim to superiority. Reputation is everything. Even the emperor has to maintain an illusion of propriety. What chance does a clueless count have? If news spreads that Rowan impregnated a maid, there's no way the child could be legitimized as hers. Without noble status, the child wouldn't even be considered for the nobility yearbook, let alone gain any legal privileges. The royal family would never accept such an obvious scandal. The maid hesitates but eventually nods, admitting that Ariana has a point. Ariana shifts her thoughts to Rowan's business. He may be neglecting his duties as a count, lost in the pleasures of noble life, but his enterprises continue to flourish. That's likely thanks to Cameo, his asset manager. The once humble pawn shop Rowan inherited has transformed into something formidable, no doubt due to Cameo's competence. Ariana muses that she wouldn't mind having such a capable assistant for her own business. Turning back to the maid, she asks if she remembers Uncle Daniel, a restoration expert who once worked with Minister Palvin. The maid confirms, though she recalls he retired after an unfortunate incident. Ariana already knows that, which is precisely why she needs him. She hands the maid a letter, instructing her to reach out to him. Before leaving, the maid hesitates before suggesting Ariana should replace Elena as her attendant. She recommends Gwen, a former head maid, for the role. Ariana considers it. Gwen handles the tea leaves, if she remembers correctly. She decides to trust the maid's judgment and agrees. Once alone, she picks up a magazine detailing the luxury goods market. The Empire's elite collectors are currently obsessed with acquiring antiques and artifacts, particularly those from the Empire's history. The Republic of Linnet admires the Empire's centuries-old traditions just as much as the Empire admires Linnet's wealth. Owning a piece of history elevates one's status in the eyes of the wealthy. Ariana's eyes flicker with amusement as she thinks about the items she plans to sell. They will certainly find their way into the hands of people desperate to prove their importance. Right after the wedding, Rowan plays the role of a devoted husband, treating Ariana with care and earning the late Count Astaroth's trust. But the moment he inherits the title, his true nature creeps out. He starts nitpicking over the smallest things, acting oblivious when it benefits him, and withholding money, accusing Ariana of being wasteful for her own amusement. One incident remains fresh in her memory, her birthday. He dismisses the idea of celebrating, scoffing in front of the servants as if she had asked him to sacrifice his future. Then he storms off, leaving her standing there, humiliated. Even the servants begin to voice their frustrations. One of them speaks up about the Count's constant harassment, claiming he always accuses them of disloyalty. Another insists that they have always treated the family's affairs as their own and that his behavior is unacceptable. It isn't about his common origins. His blatant disrespect toward Ariana and the household is what makes him unbearable. Ariana cuts them off with a firm tone. Regardless of how they feel, Rowan is still Count Astaroth and her husband. Disrespecting him is no different from disrespecting her. As long as she remains in this house, he must be treated with the honor his title demands. In return, she will fulfill her role as his wife. Now, back to the present, Rowan storms into her room, furious. Ariana barely glances at him, calmly asking what the matter is. He claims she already knows. She immediately understands. Elena must have known how the servants would react, yet she rang the bell anyway, acting as though she was unaware of the consequences. Rowan continues ranting, claiming Elena would have suffered in silence if he hadn't been there. He accuses Ariana of ignoring her out of anger. She watches him, unimpressed. His entire argument hinges on the assumption that she would be furious over the situation, as if that justifies his actions. When he realizes she isn't reacting as expected, he accuses her of deflecting. He warns her not to push him, threatening that he won't stand still. Her eyebrow lifts slightly as she asks what exactly he plans to do. His voice rises as he declares that he will cut off household expenses until she fulfills her duties as countess. That includes wages for the servants she supposedly cares so much about. He expects this to be the breaking point. Instead, Ariana rises from her chair, her expression calm. If his only contribution to the Astaroth household is financial support, then refusing to provide it means he is failing in his role as count. If that's the case, there is no reason for her to treat him as one. His face darkens, fists clenching in frustration. He demands to know why she never backs down, why she refuses to show him respect as her husband. She meets his gaze, asking what exactly he believes respect is. Their arrangement has always been based on mutual benefits. She tolerated his behavior as long as he upheld his end of the deal. But now the terms have changed. From now on, she wants nothing to do with his baseless threats. If Elena is so important, then he should take full responsibility for the woman carrying his child. A few days pass, and Ariana finds herself deep in thought. Since her last conversation with Rowan, nothing significant has happened. If he had truly lost his temper and cut off the household expenses, she could have used that as evidence that he wasn't fulfilling his marital duties. Grounds for divorce. But of course, that didn't happen. It has to be Cameo's doing. The numbers must have been calculated just right so that there's no real issue. Something far too meticulous for Rowan to pull off on his own. If she could bring Cameo to her side, things would become much easier in many ways. But persuading a man as competent as him won't be simple. As she mulls over this, a maid enters informing her that a guest has arrived. However, he doesn't have an appointment. Ariana raises an eyebrow and asks who it is. The maid hesitates for a moment before describing him as a very handsome gentleman. Ariana frowns slightly as she wonders who this gentleman might be. Curious, she heads to meet the guest. The moment she lays eyes on him, her steps falter. Of all people, she never expected to see him here, the man from the detective agency. She quickly regains her composure and approaches him. He sips his tea leisurely, clearly in no rush. She asks why he's here. Without missing a beat, he comments that it's rather unladylike to greet someone so bluntly. She resists the urge to scoff. A man like him lecturing her on ladylike behavior? Amusing. She repeats her question, then pauses to take in his appearance. He looks entirely different from when they last met. He smirks, explaining that he couldn't exactly show up dressed as he was before. He had to put in a bit of effort into his disguise. Ariana raises an eyebrow at his choice of words. A bit of a disguise? He looks like he could walk onto a stage and steal the spotlight from the lead actor. She comments on his acting skills, saying he might have chosen the wrong profession. He chuckles, admitting that in his line of work, good acting is essential. She narrows her eyes slightly. If he's here, it must mean there's some progress in the case. She asks him outright. As they talked, a blonde-haired girl passing through the hallway catches sight of him. She stops mid-step, eyes widening as a deep blush spreads across her face. Who is that handsome man in the house? Ariana considers that it hasn't been long since she sought out his help, yet he's already returned with information. He starts with an update on the sculpture. It's been submitted to the auction, and just as she predicted, they didn't ask too many questions about its origins. She nods, remarking that the Astaroth family has quite a network when it comes to art-related matters. He chuckles and corrects her, pointing out that the Astaroths are prestigious in more than just the art world. Ariana studies him carefully. He seems to know quite a bit about her family, which isn't surprising given his line of work, but it's still an unsettling thought. Switching topics, he mentions that he just came from inspecting the pawn shop run by the Count. Rowan's business is rumored to be highly profitable, yet the shop itself barely has any customers. Ariana scoffs, explaining that Rowan claims he mainly handles large transactions, so foot traffic doesn't matter. But he raises an interesting point. If Rowan is making such high-stakes deals, word should have spread. Even within social circles, someone would have noticed. Adding to the suspicion, Rowan's vault remains in excellent shape despite his extravagant spending on entertainment. The logical conclusion? Shady money. It's best to start the investigation there. Without hesitation, he asks if she can get him the Count's ledger. Ariana folds her arms, muttering that the ledger is in the hands of Rowan's asset manager, Cameo. She admits she hadn't even considered how Rowan and Cameo might each be managing separate accounts. Without missing a beat, he casually states that he'll just steal it. Ariana stares at him, momentarily speechless. Did he just say that so brazenly? He moves on as if he hasn't just admitted to a crime. That's the progress on her request, and also he'll be escorting her to the Southern auction. She raises an eyebrow, commenting on how well he plays the noble role. He simply shrugs, reminding her that it's all part of the job. She smirks, noting that it's very easy for men in his profession to charm money out of unsuspecting ladies. He leans in slightly, lowering his voice as he adds that men who deal in dangerous work have a way of setting their minds to it. Ariana eyes him warily. Surely he's just talking about risky work in general, right? Before she can say anything, he casually informs her that from now on he'll be visiting under the alias Baron Sayer from the Crocell Republic. She repeats the name thoughtfully. It's actually a clever choice. Carousel has little interaction with other countries, and information about it is scarce. The only time she ever saw their royal family was once in her childhood, just the king and his son, appearing briefly in public. She makes a mental note, Baron Sayer. He asks if she has any connections with nobles from the Republic. Ariana shakes her head, answering that she doesn't. He raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. She reaffirms her statement, adding that her late father had a close relationship with the former king, but that's as far as it goes. He nods, processing the information. Shifting the conversation, she asks if she can just visit the pawn shop directly to get progress reports. He stares at her for a moment before asking if she really wants to go back to that dingy alley. She shrugs, pointing out that it's not that dangerous as long as no one does anything conspicuous. He sighs, rubbing his temple like she just suggested walking barefoot through a minefield. Her presence alone, he explains, is anything but inconspicuous, especially in a place like that. She scoffs inwardly. What, do the employees of the pawn shop not bother ensuring their customers' safety? He clarifies that if a client gets into trouble and can't pay the commission, it's a wasted effort for them, and personally, he'd rather avoid that headache. Now that makes sense. She nods, finally understanding his reasoning. Considering another option, she suggests handling everything through letters. He immediately shuts that down, explaining that letters can be tampered with or leaked. The safest method is verbal communication. She crosses her arms, muttering that this is just an investigation into a wayward husband. Does it really need to be handled like some great national secret? He simply assures her that he'll do the job properly. With that, he announces that he's said everything he needs to and prepares to leave. If there's anything to report, he'll come directly to the Count's mansion. Before he can walk off, she stops him with a question. What excuse should she give her husband for his visits? He smirks, saying there are plenty of natural excuses, like telling Rowan that he's her lover. Ariana freezes, her eyes widened. Did he just... He looks at her expectantly, amused by her reaction. Why is she so surprised? Her husband has a mistress, after all. If the wife has a lover, the husband might finally experience a fraction of the humiliation he's been dishing out. Maybe then he'll realize how disgusting it is to parade around his affair so openly, especially if the supposed lover is someone like him. Ariana's thoughts screech to a halt. Did he just praise his own looks? Is he a narcissist or something? Well, he's not exactly wrong. A light blush creeps onto her face before she shakes it off. She firmly rejects the idea, saying there's no need for her to put on an act. She has no intention of reciprocating those kinds of feelings. He raises an eyebrow. Is she really not seething with anger? Of course she is, but not because her husband has a mistress. She's angry because he broke their contract. If this had happened shortly after their marriage, maybe it would have shocked her. Back then, she actually had hopes for a proper married life. Now it just feels inevitable. He's exactly the type of man who would do something like this. Besides, if she sought revenge on a filthy person, wouldn't that make her just as filthy? That would be a loss, wouldn't it? For once, he stays silent. Then, after a pause, he speaks again. If he doesn't want to be like her husband, he could simply unilaterally play the role of someone who admires her. His gaze softens, locking onto hers with an intensity that sends a rush of warmth to her face. She stares back, momentarily speechless. For a few seconds, she can't form a single coherent thought. Finally, she manages to recover. With a deep breath, she tells him he's in the wrong profession. He should have been a stage actor, an extreme one at that. He chuckles, thanking her for the compliment. She rolls her eyes, saying it's a waste of his acting skills in this situation. Besides, her husband likely wouldn't even care who she's supposedly fooling around with. Instead, she'll just tell him that he's a businessman from the Republic, here because he's interested in the Astaroth collection. With a charming smile, he kisses her hand and agrees to her request. He assures her that he'll accompany her on the day of the auction. His movements are precise, his mannerisms impeccable, so much so that Ariana can't help but compare him to Rowan. He's perfectly executing the court etiquette of the Republic. Better than Rowan ever did, that's for sure. She watches him for a moment, silently acknowledging his skill in disguising himself as a noble. Then, without another word, she turns and leaves the chamber. On the way to her room, she absent-mindedly goes over the day's events. However, the moment she steps inside, her thoughts screech to a halt. There, standing by her jewelry box, is a blonde-haired girl rifling through her belongings. Ariana's eyes narrow slightly. Flory? The girl jumps, spinning around with a bright, innocent smile. Flory Green, Rowan Astaroth's younger sister, waves at her as if she hadn't just been caught red-handed. "Oh, sister," Flory chirps. Ariana crosses her arms, waiting for an explanation. Flory, unfazed, clasps her hands together and tilts her head. She says she was merely admiring the beautiful ornaments in the jewelry box. No harm in looking, right? Then, as if she suddenly remembers something urgent, she gives an awkward laugh and announces that it's dinner time. With a quick, "Rest well, sister," she tries to breeze past Ariana. Unfortunately for her, Ariana isn't that easy to fool. Before Flory can escape, Ariana calmly calls her name. Flory freezes. "You better return it," Ariana says, eyes flicking down to the girl's hand. "The ring on your finger, that's mine." The color drains from Flory's face so fast it's almost impressive. Oh no, this is bad. She's never been caught stealing before. Flory doesn't hesitate even after being caught. She smiles sweetly, acting as if nothing is wrong, and casually asks for the ring as if it should naturally belong to her. She complains about having a tea party to attend and not having a suitable ring to wear, adding that Ariana hasn't gifted her anything this season. Even with money, finding something of that brand is difficult. Ariana knows exactly what Flory is doing. The Astaroth family's financial struggles have left her jewelry collection consisting mostly of heirlooms and old pieces from her parents. She realized long ago that Flory had been stealing from her, but instead of confronting her, she tried a different approach. She had given her finer things, hoping that having better jewelry of her own would stop her from taking Ariana's. But Flory's greed has no limits. The way she continues to ask for the ring so boldly, even after being caught, makes it clear she assumes Ariana will let it slide again. That assumption, however, is about to be shattered. Flory is no longer the sister of the so-called grateful husband who resolved the family's debts. There is no longer a reason to indulge her behavior. Ariana meets her gaze, her tone firm, as she tells her to stop this petty theft. Flory freezes, as if she didn't hear correctly. Her expression shifts between disbelief and indignation as she questions Ariana's words, but the response remains the same. This is nothing more than petty theft. The color drains from Flory's face. She must have assumed Ariana had never noticed her past actions, that she had been clever enough to avoid suspicion. But now, with everything laid bare, her mind scrambles for a way out. She suddenly throws the ring to the ground, her demeanor shifting from shock to outrage in an instant. Her voice rises as she accuses Ariana of looking down on their family just because they come from common origins. She claims Ariana is living in comfort thanks to the money her brother worked hard to earn, yet refuses to part with a single ring. She calls it ingratitude, making it sound as if Ariana is the one at fault. Ariana remains calm, her tone measured as she points out the irony of Flory's accusations. If she truly cared about respect and fairness, she wouldn't just be taking everything from Ariana without hesitation. The clothes, the jewelry, the invitations, all of it under Ariana's name. Otherwise, it starts to look less like family and more like charity, doesn't it? Flory flinches, momentarily thrown off by the unyielding expression on Ariana's face. She had expected the usual reaction, Ariana backing down, letting it slide, perhaps even offering something extra to smooth things over. But this time, the usual script isn't playing out. A hint of astonishment flickers in her eyes as she wonders if Ariana was always like this. Then Ariana's gaze drifts to Flory's outfit. She casually mentions that even the clothes she's wearing belong to her. Flory stiffens, suddenly wondering if she's about to be asked to strip right then and there. Instead of arguing further, she huffs, claiming she'll just leave. But not without a final, desperate attempt at control, throwing out a threat about telling Rowan all about the humiliation she suffered. Surely he won't stay quiet about it, right? Ariana watches her storm off, unimpressed. As the sound of Flory's footsteps fades, she mutters to herself, wondering if that was supposed to be a real threat. She picks up the fallen ring, turning it in her fingers as memories resurface, her mother wearing this very piece when she was just a child. The warmth of nostalgia lingers for a moment before fading back into the present, where the realities of her situation are far less sentimental. Flory paces back and forth, fuming. She mutters to herself, convinced Ariana has lost her mind. But no matter, Rowan will surely put her in her place. When he arrives, she throws herself into a dramatic display of tears, twisting the story in her favor. Rowan predictably takes the bait. His expression darkens as he clenches his fists, demanding to know if Ariana truly had the audacity to claim Flory's jewelry as her own. And worse, did she really throw Flory's ring in the trash right in front of her? He mutters to himself, wondering if Ariana has completely lost it. Divorce? What money does she think she has? Before he can stew too long, his mother, Lady Green, enters. She declares that discipline has clearly fallen apart in her absence, and that Ariana must be reminded of her place. As if summoned, Ariana arrives with her maids. She greets Lady Green politely, but the older woman isn't interested in pleasantries. She immediately launches into a tirade about Rowan's sacrifice, how he put up nearly $1 trillion to save Ariana's family. Without him, Ariana and her servants would be out on the streets. How dare she be so ungrateful? Before Ariana can respond, her head maid steps forward, calmly reminding Lady Green that Ariana holds the title of Lady, personally bestowed by the Emperor. The room falls silent for a moment. Lady Green scoffs. If Ariana wanted that title to mean something, she should have married someone else. After all, she is her son's wife, and she is the mother of Count Astaroth. The maids gasp at the blatant disrespect. Lady Green then turns to Ariana, claiming that the head maid's insolence is a reflection of Ariana's poor example. If the servants have no manners, it's because their mistress doesn't know how to show proper respect. Ariana listens patiently, then tilts her head slightly. So, according to Lady Green, if a subordinate behaves badly, it means their superior has set the wrong example? Then does that mean Rowan became an adulterer because his superior, his mother, set the example first? Silence. Lady Green's face twitches. Ariana continues, her voice smooth. After all, she was Baron Alpina's mistress, wasn't she? The entire room holds its breath. Lady Green's expression sours instantly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. She demands Ariana repeat herself, but Ariana remains perfectly composed. If Lady Green believes in properly educating subordinates, she should start with her own son. Meanwhile, Ariana will ensure her people are equally well-mannered. Lady Green explodes, shouting incoherent insults, but Ariana simply turns and walks away. The maids struggle to hold back their laughter, their amusement slipping through in hushed giggles. Once they're alone, the head maid beams. She tells Ariana she's relieved to finally hear her speak up. She's always been so composed, no matter how much Lady Green provoked her. Ariana sighs. The maid isn't wrong, but dealing with that family is exhausting. She can't wait for the auction day. A few days later, the morning of the Southern auction arrives, and Ariana prepares, dressing in her finest attire. Ariana glances at her reflection, adjusting the intricate details of her outfit. With a sigh, she turns to her personal attendant and asks if dressing up like this is really necessary just for an auction. Gwen, ever cheerful, responds with a knowing smile, saying that the gentleman accompanying them today is quite the sight to behold. The entire mansion has been talking about him. Hearing this, Ariana raises a brow. Even Flory? She asked, as Gwen nods enthusiastically, explaining that Flory was absolutely smitten and kept asking about his background after he visited without an appointment. Ariana frowns slightly. Visiting without an appointment usually implies familiarity. Flory must have assumed they were close. She mutters that Flory must have misunderstood, but Gwen tilts her head playfully and questions whether it's really a misunderstanding. Ariana narrows her eyes. What else would it be? Or is Gwen hoping it's not? Gwen laughs and says she's not the only one. Everyone in the mansion is hoping that the handsome gentleman will put the Count in his place. Ariana exhales, exasperated. And why does it have to be him? If anyone is putting Rowan in his place, it should be her. When they step outside, Wendy is already waiting. Unfortunately, Flory has gotten to him first, practically draping herself over him. She exclaims in delight, realizing that he's the Baron from the Republic, which explains why she's never seen him before. She chatters away, boasting that she usually knows everyone in high society and eagerly prying into his reasons for visiting. How long is he staying? Does he have a residence in the Empire? Wendy, to his credit, remains politely silent, but Flory remains undeterred. She boldly suggests that if he doesn't have a place to stay, he should just live here. Surely her brother would gladly offer his room. Ariana clears her throat, making her presence known. Flory is certainly bold, inviting guests as if she owns the house. But Ariana is the actual lady of the mansion. Wendy immediately rises at the sound of Ariana's cough, turning toward her with swift elegance. He approaches and takes her hand, his touch light yet deliberate. Without hesitation, he tells her he's here to accompany her, pledging to escort her wherever she needs to go. As he lifts her hand slightly, he asks for permission, his voice smooth and full of charm. Flory watches in disbelief, stunned by the sight of him acting so refined. She had expected someone reserved and indifferent, not this effortlessly charming gentleman. Irritated, she reaches out and grabs his arm, refusing to be ignored. She demands to know why he would just walk away from their conversation as if she wasn't even there. Without so much as a flinch, Wendy dismisses the idea that she was ever having a conversation, pointing out that loudly talking at someone doesn't make it a discussion. The remark lands hard, and Flory's expression sours. Offended, she demands an explanation, her face twisting as if she's just swallowed something unpleasant. The audacity of a mere baron, someone beneath her brother's rank, speaking to her this way is beyond infuriating. Her frustration boils over, and she raises her voice, invoking her brother's authority as the head of the household. Wendy finally acknowledges her directly, his tone calm but firm, advising that if she wishes to assert authority, she should first learn to carry herself with the appropriate dignity. The words strike deep, leaving her fuming. Normally, mentioning her brother's name is enough to make people show respect, yet Wendy remains unfazed. The realization stings her pride, and she storms off in frustration, declaring the situation ridiculous. Watching her leave, Wendy turns back to Ariana, commenting on how exhausting it must be to deal with that attitude regularly. Ariana exhales, clarifying that she hasn't been tolerating Flory, only respecting her. When he questions this, she explains that Flory was, until recently, the sister of a husband she had been grateful to for paying off her family's debts. Knowing Flory is likely running to Rowan now, she suggests leaving before things escalate further. Wendy smirks, reminding her of his promise to escort her. She wastes no time, instructing him to hurry since there are other stops to make before the auction house. At the Imperial Central Bank, the manager rushes forward eagerly, welcoming Ariana with excessive enthusiasm. A VIP of her status rarely visits in person, and he insists that had she reached out, the bank would have sent someone to her mansion instead. Ariana, uninterested in formalities, gets straight to the point. She requests the financial records of the Astaroth family for the past year, her voice composed but firm. As she flips through the documents, a familiar sense of amusement settles over her. The records tell a clear story, 2 names dominating every transaction. It's almost laughable how difficult it is to tell if this is her account or if she's simply funding Rowan's entire family. Using a check is simple. Tear one from the checkbook, write the amount, sign it, and hand it over. The merchant then takes it to the bank for payment from the linked account. In principle, only the account owner's signature is valid. But Rowan, ever the generous son and brother, insists that his mother and sister should also have access to the family's checks. Ariana had once sympathized with their situation. Being unable to inherit her own family's title simply because she was a daughter, she understood what it felt like to be overlooked. So, she had allowed it. But their spending? Beyond absurd. The household's operational funds, provided by Rowan himself, were never enough. Flipping through the records, her eyes land on a particularly ridiculous pattern. 8 luxury bags a month, each one costing as much as an average worker's monthly salary. She mutters to herself in disbelief. There's no way Rowan doesn't notice this, or maybe he just chooses not to. Their spending habits haven't changed at all since before the marriage. Without hesitation, she instructs the bank manager to change the account settings so that only her signature is valid for issuing checks. The manager hesitates, asking about the count's authorization. Ariana barely suppresses a sigh, calmly explaining that her husband doesn't involve himself in family affairs, nor does he need to. He has his own separate account. The manager nods, acknowledging her request. To finalize the change, he hands her the necessary paperwork, asking her to write her request formally so they can process it. Ariana takes the pen, ready to make it official. Normally, a lady of her status wouldn't show up at the bank unannounced, but exceptions could always be made, especially when the difference in rank between her and Rowan was so clear. She hadn't planned on using their status disparity like this, but this wasn't just about temporarily cutting off his mother and sister's spending spree. Once the merchants came knocking to collect payments and found the checks invalid, they'd go straight to Rowan. Only then would he realize the full extent of his family's extravagant shopping habits, buried under a mountain of luxury bills. Sometimes, watching someone else's family drama play out isn't too bad, she thought with a small smirk, handing the final document to the bank manager. At the auction house, a man approaches them with a polite bow, informing Ariana that the CEO has generously reserved an entire table for her so she can watch in comfort. She thanks him, instructing him to convey her gratitude to the CEO for such thoughtful hospitality. Checking the auction agenda, she notes that the sculpture she submitted is listed under the title The Birth of the Goddess of Beauty and has been set as the highlight of the finale. Wendy, glancing around at the murmuring crowd, voices his concern. People are already talking about how breathtaking it must be, eagerly anticipating its reveal. He asks if she's worried. Ariana simply turns the question back on him. Of course he's worried. Knowing the reality of the sculpture, how could he not be? He still doesn't understand why Soderin agreed to her plan in the first place. She explains that her father had built friendships with art lovers from all walks of life, regardless of their status. Wat Soderin, the CEO of Soderin Auctions, had been one of his friends. But the only thing that connection had earned her was a chance to show Wat the piece. Wendy hesitates, trying to piece things together. So that means he trails off as realization dawns. Wat Soderin had seen the sculpture and, without her knowledge, decided it was worthy of being the auction's final showpiece. Has that ugly sculpture somehow changed? He mentally braces himself for disaster. Just then, the organizer steps onto the stage, greeting the guests with a warm welcome before announcing that the auction is about to begin. Auction prices fluctuate wildly, ranging from mere hundreds to tens of millions. The final item of the evening steals everyone's attention as the organizer steps forward to introduce it with grand enthusiasm. The Birth of the Goddess of Beauty, a statue dating back to the Millennium War, is presented as a masterpiece that has survived through history without damage. As the cloth is removed, a heavy silence fills the room. Faces shift from anticipation to sheer disbelief. People stare, murmuring among themselves, questioning if this bizarre sculpture is truly meant to represent the goddess of beauty. Doubt and confusion ripple through the audience. Wendy, taking one look at the statue, confirms his worst fears. It remains exactly as he remembered, unchanged, unimproved, and just as questionable as ever. No miraculous transformation, no hidden brilliance. The bidding begins at 1 million. Hesitation lingers, but given that the item was brought in by Soderin Auctions, a few hopeful bidders raise their paddles. The price inches upward, though enthusiasm remains lukewarm at best. Ariana watches the numbers climb, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a composed smile, she raises her paddle and casually bids 30 million. Stunned silence falls over the room. The organizer, struggling to process what just happened, repeats the bid, his voice tinged with disbelief. Eyes dart toward Ariana, murmurs breaking out across the hall. Some dismiss her as a reckless, young woman throwing money at an overpriced piece just because it's the final item. Others scoff, assuming she lacks the ability to evaluate art properly. The auctioneer hesitates before preparing to call it. If no one else bids, the statue will sell at this astonishing price. After the auction concludes, Ariana approaches the organizer and asks if the sculpture officially belongs to her now. He confirms with a polite nod. She then follows up with another question. Whatever she chooses to do with it is entirely her freedom, correct? The organizer, unaware of what's coming, casually affirms. Meanwhile, the photographer struggles to get a decent shot of the so-called masterpiece. No matter how he angles the camera, the sculpture refuses to look even remotely dignified. Frustrated, he thinks about how difficult it will be to make it presentable for the auction article. Just then, Ariana does something completely unexpected. She lets the statue drop. A sharp crack echoes through the hall as the sculpture shatters against the floor. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Some whisper that she must be insane, others murmur in disbelief, questioning if they really just witnessed a 30 million bid getting smashed to pieces. Wendy feels a chill run down his spine. A suspicion creeps into his mind, and sure enough, as the dust settles, the truth is revealed. Among the broken plaster lies something gleaming, a golden sculpture hidden within. Ariana calmly picks it up, and now at last the statue truly matches its grand title. The moment triggers a memory from 10 years ago. Her father, the Count, had just returned from a trip down south, bringing back artifacts he had personally selected. Pablo, the family's appraisal expert, had not been pleased. He had scolded the Count for not taking him along, warning him about swindlers selling dubious goods. As expected, one of the 5 items purchased turned out to be fake. The Count immediately suspected the odd-looking statue in the collection. Just then, a much younger Ariana had wandered into the room and begun examining it closely. The craftsmanship was crude, but something about the balance and composition seemed intentional. She had voiced her thoughts aloud, wondering if the sculpture was an unfinished piece by a famous artist, or if the designer and sculptor had been 2 different people entirely. Pablo had confirmed its origins, explaining that it dated back to the Millennium War, a brutal civil war over the imperial throne that had lasted 100 years. Despite its actual duration, people had called it the Millennium War due to its relentless and devastating nature. Most artifacts from that period had been destroyed, making intact pieces extremely rare. Even without artistic merit, simply existing from that time made such items invaluable. If they held true artistic value, they could even be classified as national treasures. The Count had been relieved to hear he had acquired a genuine artifact this time. However, Ariana had noticed something unusual, an inscription at the base of the statue. Pablo had acknowledged it, but admitted they had yet to decipher it. Typically, signatures or titles on artwork were meant for recognition, but this inscription was encrypted, deliberately hiding its meaning. Curious, she had questioned why someone would go to such lengths to obscure the identity of a sculpture. Pablo, ever the scholar, had simply told her that in the world of art and history, nothing was ever without reason. He had then encouraged her to uncover the truth herself. Back in the present, Ariana explains how she unraveled the mystery behind the statue. She had started by decrypting the inscription at the base. Once she deciphered the text and realized it read, "The birth of the goddess of beauty," she found it completely contradictory. The exterior was far from beautiful, making the title feel like some elaborate joke. But then, a thought struck her. What if the plaster wasn't the true exterior at all? Determined to find an answer, she had turned to historical records from the Millennium War. After years of research, she finally found the missing piece of the puzzle. During that time, valuable artifacts were often covered in plaster to protect them from being looted or damaged in battle. That was when she became convinced the true goddess of beauty had been hidden beneath the rough exterior all along. Wendy listens carefully and asks what led her to take such a bold risk. She explains that the final step was determining what the real statue was made of. If it was fragile, recklessly breaking the plaster could have damaged the masterpiece inside. Wendy acknowledges the danger, noting that if they hadn't been careful, they could have destroyed something priceless. Ariana nods, agreeing that it had taken years to confirm everything. She could have restored the statue at any time, but there had been no rush. Instead, she had waited for the perfect opportunity to reveal it, until now. Wendy still seems stuck on the way she unveiled it. He brings up the dramatic drop, questioning how she could throw such a valuable statue on the floor without hesitation. Ariana smirks and confidently states that she knew the golden sculpture inside was strong enough to withstand it. More importantly, she had wanted to make a lasting impression. She certainly gets her wish. The moment is already making waves. Every newspaper and news outlet will be running stories about both her and the statue. Wendy eyes her curiously and asks what she plans to do next. She had mentioned wanting to start a business. What exactly is she plotting? Ariana only grins, refusing to reveal anything. She teases that if she told him, he might just steal her idea. Wendy doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he reaches for her chin, tilting her face toward him. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 2. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, ciao!